Getting clear about the problem is definitely challenging, and it takes a great deal of courage. Throughout Fast Start and Module 1, Joel and I are going to walk you step by step and look at some things that might be blocking you from gaining clarity, because both of us had to work through the same process. Our hope is that it will build a strong foundation for you to work from. The first step in building this foundation is to get your head out of the sand. You have got to be willing to get your head out of the sand if any real solution is to be found. It also requires you having an open mind and listen to what others have learned from having a similar experience as yours. The biggest mistake that parents make is not really knowing what the problem is. Instead, we get distracted by all the symptoms of the problem, and then we start addressing those. So what if your doctor took that same approach with you? For example, let's say that you have a severe, persistent cough, and you have been unable to get it under control, so you make a doctor's appointment. The doctor simply treats you by writing a prescription for a cough medicine. No full examination or tests are run. And then later on, your condition worsens, and there's the discovery that you actually have pneumonia. So the point I'm trying to make here is we have to evaluate the situation to get to the real problem. Another reason that parents keep their head in the sand is because there's a stigma associated with drug use. No parent wants to face the nightmare that their child is doing drugs and alcohol. It's much easier to think, not my child. So we begin to look for socially acceptable reasons for their behavior. We might look at common medical reasons like a diagnosis of ADD, bipolar, anxiety, or even depression. In addition, we look to blame the problem on our family situations, like maybe being a single parent, a divorce or death, or maybe abuse, which all can add more stress to a teenager's life. I can personally relate to this as I grabbed onto some of those same reasons to explain or justify my own son's bad behavior. I also wanted to believe that it was maybe normal teenage behavior, just a phase, and that he would mature and eventually stop making those bad choices. Oftentimes, we go looking for answers in all the wrong places. We start by asking our friends, neighbors, the pastor at church, maybe a coach or teacher for advice about what to do with our child. Mostly, they just give us advice about the symptoms and how to control them. For example, I was told that my son just needed to get a job so he would have less idle time and therefore he would stay out of trouble. So we made arrangements for him to work for a friend who owned a landscaping company. Now, it did make the days of that summer go by a little bit easier, but in the end, it was just an exercise in futility. It didn't work. Taking advice from someone who doesn't really know or understand the real problem is not that helpful. So what really helps us to get our head out of the sand? Let's look at some possible places to start. First, step back and evaluate the symptoms and look at what's really going on. Has there been trouble at school with behavior, or maybe the grades are lower? Are you experiencing a lot of disrespect or out-of-control behavior at home? Maybe you have found evidence of drug use or some drug paraphernalia, and perhaps your child has been arrested. Start with the what. What is really going on? So if we start where they are now, it's more than normal teenage behavior. If these behaviors are already evident, then more than likely there are many more unknown issues that you are not even aware of. When you get your head out of the sand, you will begin to realize that drugs and/or alcohol use is at the heart of the problem behaviors. Far too often I see parents chase the why their child is using drugs. Meanwhile, the drug use continues and the damage worsens. You see, drug use is a thinking problem, not a behavior problem. In our next segment, we'll dive much deeper into this very important concept of understanding how drug use impacts the brain and therefore the thinking patterns. For now, though, I just want to make the point that the drugs and/or the alcohol is the problem. It's time to wake up, open your eyes to the reality of that. I hope that you're not offended by me saying it in that way, but when we get stuck in denial, nothing changes. We want to help you embrace the solution to the problem and stop the chaos. As a result of your teen using drugs and alcohol, the brain is the organ most affected. The behaviors that you are experiencing are simply a result of this new way of thinking that is going on in your teen's brain. Years ago, this kind of thinking was actually labeled stinking thinking. I bet you would agree with that now. It does stink. When drugs are involved, you must focus on the drugs. The symptoms of the drug use are many. Sometimes it looks like the symptoms of other mental health problems like anxiety, depression, or bipolar. Sometimes it just looks like bad behavior, lying, cheating, and stealing. It is so tempting to focus on the symptoms because we think we know what to do. If it's mental health, we take them to a doctor. The problem is diagnosed, problem solved, we think. If it's bad behavior, we simply punish them until they comply. But this doesn't work. If you keep your head stuck in the sand, refusing to acknowledge the problem is drug use, it will never get any better. If you stay convinced that the problem is something other than the drugs, then you chase solutions to some other problems than drug use. Then the drug problem will never get better. I know it's tempting to keep your head in the sand. No parent wants to believe that their child is using drugs. The question is, can you love your child enough to pull your head out of the sand and really see, maybe for the first time, what is really going on around you? Can you let go of the excuses that you have told yourself and just simply see it for what it is? You're going to see, and all of our training segments in Module 1 are about getting really clear about the problem. Yes, it will be challenging, and it will require courage, but stick with us and we'll help you gain that clarity that you are seeking.